On behalf of City Lights booksellers and publishers, I'd like to welcome you to City Lights Live, the virtual reading series that continues in the footsteps of our in-store calendar during the time of the pandemic. We continue to celebrate the works of authors we know and love with readings, discussions, and forums moving into the spring season and beyond. Today, we are delighted and honored to have with us Courttia Newland, celebrating the US release of his new novel, A River Called Time. It is published by our friends at Akashic Books in Brooklyn, really awesome indie press that just publishes just some of the most amazing fiction and a lot of really, really cool stuff. Please check them out. So Courttia's book is really this tour de force of the heart, intellect, and the imagination, and really kind of reveals his great mastery as a storyteller. He explores an alternate universe that is really at once complex, multi-layered, and really kind of challenges us to consider the possibilities of a world informed by very different energies. Mr. Newland is a novelist, a screenwriter, a playwright, an educator, and an activist. He is the author of numerous works of fiction, which include The Scholar, Society Within, Snakeskin, and The Dying Wish. He's going to be joined this afternoon in conversation by two really incredible writers in their own right. We're happy and honored to also have them with us, Naomi Jackson and Victor LaValle. Naomi Jackson is the author of The Star Side of Bird Hill, which is nominated for an NAACP Image Award and the Hurston Wright Legacy Award, and longlisted for the National Book Critics Circle John Leonard Prize, as well as numerous other honors. Ms. Jackson is assistant professor of English at Rutgers University in Newark. She was the 2018 and 19 writer in residence at Queens College and previously taught at the University of Iowa, University of Pennsylvania, and City College of New York, and the Oberlin College. Victor LaValle is the author of 4 novels, which include The Ecstatic, Big Machine, The Devil in Silver, and The Changeling. He's also authored 2 novellas, Lucretia and the Croons, and The Ballad of Black Tom, as well as a short story collection called Slapboxing with Jesus. And also he's done some kind of graphic novel work as well. So really out there doing some wonderful, wonderful stuff. He's been a recipient of numerous awards, to include the World Fantasy Award, British World Fantasy Award, the Bram Stoker Award, as well as many, many others. Such a delight to have you all with us, gracing our virtual halls. Courttia Newland, Naomi Jackson, Victor LaValle, welcome to City Lights Live.
Well, thank you so much, Peter. This is a pleasure. I'm sorry that we can't actually be at City Lights Books. I've been there at least once on a trip to San Francisco, and you do owe us all a drink when we finally do make it to San Francisco. I just want to say what a pleasure and honor it is to host a conversation with Victor and Courttia. It's very rare that you get to actually sit with your heroes and ask them questions. And I just want to begin before I ask them some questions and we have a conversation about A River Called Time and writing more generally. I am known, I think, among my friends, and I see some of my friends in the audience, thanks for coming, as a bit of a praise minister. And so I want to just talk about some of the things that I appreciate about both Victor and Courttia's work. Courttia has so many novels, and one of my other questions is, how the heck does one write so many novels over the course of the last 20 some years? But I first really came to know your work as a screenwriter with the Small Axe series. And I have to say, my sister called me. I wasn't sure about Small Axe. I'm of Bayesian and Antiguan heritage, which means that I'm kind of suspicious generally. And so I wasn't sure when everybody kept texting me, like, have you seen Small Axe? Have you seen Small Axe? And my sister called me and she had seen Lover's Rock and she was crying. And she said, I finally know what Granny faced going to London from Barbados. And I didn't know what she had gone through and what that experience was like. And we had the strange experience of having nostalgia for something that we hadn't ever lived through. And so I just want to say thank you to you and to Steve McQueen and the other people who worked on that project, because I think it is actually rare as Caribbean people to see our lives and our history and our experiences rendered with such tenderness and such care on the global screen. And so that project was just such a landmark watershed moment, I think, for Caribbean people across the diaspora. And I have such a deep well of appreciation for that. And I'm just so excited that I had a chance to get to know you now as a novelist and reading A River Called Time. So I want to speak too about some real appreciations of this book specifically. So what I like about this book is that, you know, it's managing to toggle back between the kind of big ideas question and also the personal questions about how we get to be loved and to belong. How do we make family? How do we make good on the promises that our parents pour into us, right? So I think the main character, Courttia, can you tell me how I pronounce his name so I don't mess it up? Marquise?
Marquise, yeah.
Marquise. Marcus. So, you know, Marcus is doing all these things, trying to become a person, trying to become a man, trying to be a good friend, not just to his best friend, but also to the women in his life, and trying to take care of them and to step up and be present for and present with them. So he's doing all the things that we're trying to do as human beings in life, but in a very different context than what we know as the so-called real world here at this moment in 2021. And so I think what I appreciated about the book is that even though it's saying what would happen if colonialism was not a thing, what if African cosmology and African spiritual practices were actually centered, appreciated, venerated. So you're asking all these really big questions, but the basic concerns around how we relate to one another, how do we get love, how do we belong, and how do we show up when things aren't right in the world and in our relationships, all those basic questions that we're struggling with on the day-to-day level are also at the center. And so I think what I appreciate most in the book is that it's accessible. So even if you're not someone who says like, I'm a fantasy head or I'm a sci-fi head or I'm into speculative fiction, there's something in there for everybody, which is not, I don't want to diminish what you're doing by saying like, it's not cotton candy, right? It's not, or what does that mean? It's not jollof rice. Like everybody's not gonna like
everyone.
Yeah. You can't please everyone. So it's not jollof rice. But I do appreciate the way that you are thinking about the ideas questions, but also those human level questions. And I think, you know, particularly at this moment, I don't know how much you've been watching of the news in America, but it's been a pretty terrible news week in the States. And I think I appreciate the kind of unself-conscious centering of Black boys' experiences, right? And it's both about the compliant boys and the complicated boys, right? So it's not privileging one story of capital S success or excellence. I think it's questioning compliance, questioning excellence, questioning trying to do right by the people who brought you into the world. So anyway, I have so many appreciations for A River Called Time. Everybody should buy the book. I have the advanced corrected proofs. Victor, what's the copy that you have? You have the real copy.
This is the Canon Gate.
UK.
The UK
oh, that's
one.
the UK edition. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Really gorgeous.
So was that one.
Yeah, so this is that's the US edition.
That's the
US
Akashic
edition
one.
hardback.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're both really gorgeous and you
Yes.
should buy them.
Yes.
And Victor, you're not going to get out of this alive without me also giving some appreciation for you as well. So I think, I don't know if I've told you this, Victor, but I first read your work in the Fader magazine when I was a college student at Williams in the late 90s. And something happened when I read your work. I was just like, wait, hold up, you could do this in fiction? Like really? I wouldn't say that was the first moment that I wanted to become a writer, but it was the first moment that I thought you could be as honest and as raw and as much yourself on the page. And so something transformed in my reading of those first stories. And I just have felt so lucky to be able to be a witness to your work. And I'm a lover of your novels, and I teach your interview on Narrative Voice. Everybody should read the interview on Narrative Voice that Victor has. I can't even remember the name of the person who is it, Sarah Minton? I don't know why I'm blanking on that. Anyway, Other than the interview, you should also read any of Victor's novels. The Changeling, which is very chilling. The Devil in Silver, also chilling and intense. Lucretia and the Croons, an incredible novella. The Big Machine, which I love in part because there's so much fashion in that novel. I don't know if we've ever talked about that either, but I love the clothes in that book. So I just have so much appreciation for also how in every single one of your books, you're doing something completely different. I don't ever come to one of your novels and think, oh, here comes Victor again, doing Victor's things. I feel like you are charting a new kind of territory in every book. And I appreciate that ambition to swing for the trees in every single literary adventure. So thank you for setting that up as a model for how to build a life as a writer. Okay, so I'm done with the praise, I think. But I think it's an important ground to lay. I don't know that we ever have the chance to lay as many flowers at the feet of the people whose work means a lot to us. And so I value that as a solid ground from which to begin. So I have some questions for Courttia and Victor.
Take 1 second before you ask those questions, because I feel like the whole point of this is things have to go all the way around. Yes. And
oh
so
yeah, the flow.
Yes. And so I just want to take a minute to say, reading your first novel, I think Star Side of Bird Hill. Yes. Loving when you talked about feeling like you didn't know, reading my thing and saying you didn't know you could be as honest as that, as raw as that. I really felt like one of the most powerful things out of that really beautiful debut novel was the way that just the sort of generational love of the women in the family, sisters, mom, grandma, but even more, to my mind, I thought the honesty of, I feel like I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who will read the book after this, but the honesty of the sisters' experience of their mother, while also, which is, let's say, complicated and large, and somehow, to my mind, magically doesn't, also has room for love for that mother, and has room to make her a full being, even as maybe on some level they can't quite grasp all that. I just thought it was to speak of something raw, something that maybe doesn't get talked about enough. In particular, I want to say in like Black diaspora fiction. Again, like I feel like there's some things I want to save so that people experience the events of the story immediately, so that I don't ruin anything. But there are some powerful turns in the novel that you don't shy away from, that I thought were very like bold and brave, and to speak of a debut novel, even that much more impressive, because the first time out of the gate you were willing to go to these places that can be so raw and powerful, but also rich. All right. So
okay, but no, but then hold on. If everyone's gonna have a go, I have to have my turn. I feel like I haven't managed to read you, Naomi, but I did check out your interviews before we did this.
You wanted to know what you were getting into?
No, not at all. I like to come informed, you know. Like I like to come with. I feel like it's respectful for me to know something. I didn't get to read the book, but to know something about the person that I'm sharing the stage with, in order to pay your due respect. And like straight away, I feel like, you know, listening to you talk and everything, and the way that you came into writing and the path that you took, I was just so impressed, and I found it completely inspirational. As someone myself who didn't come into writing the traditional way as well, I could see a lot of parallels, and I was just really like excited. I am going to read your work, definitely. I'm excited to hear that you existed and you were in the world and you were doing your thing, and you could be inspirational to other people. And also just the way that you were talking about these diasporic stories that Victor was talking about, and the way that you were talking about Barbados, which we have in common, of course. You know, like I was like, wow, I've never seen that take before. I've never seen that done before. And instantly I was like, okay, I know I'm going to be really excited and compelled to read this novel. So I can't wait to read it. And I just like listening to you talk as well was just so inspiring. And you were saying earlier, like, how do I write so many novels? But I write these novels, I don't think they're actually that many when you look at like Percival or something like that. It's like nothing, you know what I mean? But like, where I feel like, you know, or Rupert Thompson or someone like that, but like, or Sarah Hall, but I feel like sometimes it's people like, all the time, it's people like yourselves that keep me going. And I was in a particular place where I hadn't written a novel for a long time. It took 18 years for River to come out. I started in 2002, finished the first part in 2004, and no one wanted it for such a long time in between. And what kept me going was people like you. And I could watch interviews and I can hear you talk, and like, it just makes me feel like I'm part of something so huge and big. I am not an isolated writer. I don't believe in being an isolated individual writer. I'm part of a network of arts that go right back to the beginning, you know, and storytelling that goes right back to Africa, you know. So I always feel connected to that. And you guys make me understand that that's alive and well and thriving right now. So it was such an amazing thing to see you speaking, Victor. I encountered your work, you know, with Slapboxing with Jesus, and just like so blown away by that. I teach your short stories. When I used to teach at University of Westminster, I'll teach them again when I go back. You know, yeah, I like, for me, when I read Slapboxing with Jesus, it was again at that period in time when I needed blueprints, you know, I needed like something to energize me and keep me going. And I'll keep this short, but like your book was just like an invigorator, like in such a massive way. I was like, all right, this dude here, okay, that shows me a kind of blueprint, you know, and he's doing this thing in New York, I'm doing my thing in London, and you know, one day we'll get to connect, and it happened. So yeah, no, I appreciate both of you, man, so strongly.
Thank you.
Same.
Thank you. Well, this is, I'm so sad that this is so short, because I also want to name how rare it actually is to have Black writers across the diaspora to be able to have a transatlantic conversation. You know, really, it's actually not like London to the US, it's actually like London to the Caribbean, to the US, to Africa, and then back around. I'm not great at geography, so I'm sure that that plane would have already crashed if it took that trajectory. But it's speaking across and through all those communities. And so that's a rare moment, and I just cherish the opportunity to be part of this conversation. So Courttia, can you talk about the genesis of this story? In particular, like if there are any moments in the beginning and along the way that are kind of landmark moments for you that were important in the genesis and the continuation of this book?
Yeah, totally. I think the biggest moment for me was like, you know, the conception of this book. So I published my first novel. I'd moved out of my mum's house. I was living in rented accommodation on a place called North Pole Road in West London, which is quite a notorious road for all sorts of reasons. And I was on this road, and I was living just by this zebra crossing, and in this rented accommodation right by the main road. And one night I had an out-of-body experience, I believe. One night I felt like I woke up and I couldn't see and I couldn't breathe, and I felt like there was this weight on my chest, and I could hear like a voice whispering in my ear. And this had happened all throughout my childhood as well. It happened like at numerous times. I remember one time I fell out of bed in my mum's house just trying to fight to wake up. And so this time I didn't decide actually. I was really scared. I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to suffocate. But for some reason I felt like, okay, I'm going to let go and I'm not going to fight it. And I didn't fight it. And at that point I felt, I don't know if this is true or a dream or anything like that, but this is what I felt. I had risen above my body and I was looking down, and there was me on the bed, and there's a strange figure next to the bed, leaning over me, talking in my ear. And that just really scared me then. I was like, whoa, I wasn't, wow. And I then woke up. What was strange, and I've been saying this a lot in interviews, the first thought was, wow, I wonder if that was astral projection, because I mean, it's out of body experience. I was there and there was my body, and I don't know, but like maybe that was it. And the fact that the light was coming in through the room, through the window, sorry, and the room looked exactly the same when I woke up. I looked around, everything looked exactly the same place, same light, same noises of the traffic and the buses, everything. And I was like, I wonder if that's astral projection. And then my second thought was, that'd be really cool to write about. I mean, like, straight away, that'd be really cool. I bet no one's written about this. And I was like, okay, so, and that was it. For many, many years, I just had, I want to write about astral projection. I went to some books and I picked up some books about, it said, Projection of the Astral Body was one book by Sylvain Muldoon and Hair with Carrington. And I read that, and it described what had happened to me. It said, you will have this thing, you won't be able to see, you won't be able to breathe, there'll be pressure on your chest and stuff, but if you don't fight it, you will have an out-of-body experience. So, wow, okay. And that's all I had. So then I had a separate idea about having like a building, a huge building in the middle of the city where all the rich people live. And then I thought that was just Truman Show. And I was like, okay, I read the whole synopsis and I was like, damn, you just watched Truman Show like 2 weeks ago, you know what I mean? Like, and now you just wrote out the whole thing, scrap that idea. But I didn't scrap it, I kind of kept it and then just left it to one side. And then I thought, wow, the two ideas could actually be fused into one idea. And that's when I was like, okay, now I've got a novel.
But what about this question of like looking at a world that has no colonial past? Because it seems like that was one of the rules that you set for yourself in the writing of this novel. And how hard was it to actually not do that? Like, how hard was it to write according to that actual rule? I imagine this would be impossible for me.
It was so hard. That was actually the last idea. That was the final idea. That was a nail in the coffin, so to speak, where it was just like, okay, now I'm ready to go. I'm really ready to go. And that just came out of the fact that how would African cosmology be the dominant religion? Mm-hmm. What would happen in this world's history for that to be possible? And then I was like, wow, well, slavery and colonization had to have just not happened. And that, like I said, that was it. That was okay, I'm really, really ready to go. I was stuck on for a while when I was doing the plans for it, the outlines. Sorry, I was stuck for a while about how I put it together. But once I started world building, that came. And I just made mistakes all the way through the book. I was calling people Zambian, I was calling people Nigerian. I didn't call anyone Caribbean, I'd worked that out. But it took a lot of investigation to find out what I would call the islands. A lot of decision making. It was hard. I made so many mistakes. I made reference to what did I say? I said things like not braids. It wasn't braids that I said, but I said cane row, like and stuff like that. Which, this guy's got cane row hair, and I'd be like, he can't say that. And even up until just before the book was published, I was trawling through it trying to get rid of things that I'd said by accident that I didn't realize was a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, Courttia, as you're speaking, that dream being the impetus for a book. That's how my first book actually began as well. Right. I had a dream of these two kids in a graveyard. I had been working on a terrible novel for 4 years, and I had this dream about these two kids, actually 4 kids in a graveyard in Barbados, and I was like, oh yeah, this is the book. And that's all I had for months and months and months was that opening scene. But that opening scene was the key that unlocked the rest of the book. Victor, do you have any other, are we speaking totally woo-woo? Does this experience speak at all to your own experience of how book ideas come to be?
Well, I mean, I think I probably usually can't name it what it is. So particularly like in your case, both your cases where you can say it was this specific dream or this specific moment, but I think on some level I do tend to believe that like the ideas are like you decide to sort of open the aperture. Mm-hmm. And then while you're sleeping, while you're riding on the train, whatever it is, something that I do believe that I know is woo-woo, but is a different woo-woo, is that I do believe that on some level, like when I'm really on and I'm open, I can kind of take ideas from other people just
walking around them, just by being near them. Like energy is really what it like. So maybe what I would say is like, I looked at a person and there was something about them that suddenly helped me like imagine a character, right? That would be the rational way to describe what I'm talking about. But the other way to describe what I'm talking about, and the thing that I actually believe, is that when I'm walking by people and I'm really on, that it really is sort of like, you know, like last night we watched Ghostbusters with the kids. It's like, you know, when they put out the trap and the ghost is up and then they suck the ghost into the trap. I believe like that's how my creative process works, which doesn't speak well of me because it's kind of, you know, vampiric.
Yes, it's parasitic.
But what can you do? That's being a writer.
Is.
That's right.
It really
Being a
is.
writer is being a parasite. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I remember the grandmother in my novel showed up on the bus, on the B41 bus on Flatbush Avenue. And it was like when I was very tired and towards the ending stages of writing the book. And I was like, oh, she came by to bless the book. Like that was just so clear to me. But I would only have that thought because my whole being was organized around trying to make sense of that story. Right.
Yes.
So I wonder, you know, I've been interested to watch people. I mean, clearly I'm not seeing people in the everyday, but outside of the faces of my family, but on social media, it's what places I get to see people. And I see a lot of folks talking about Octavia Butler and turning to speculative fiction as a way to make sense of the pandemic and of the strangeness of the last year plus. So I wonder if you could speak to what speculative fiction has to offer Black people specifically, and why you write it. Like, what's maybe, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that question and why people are turning to Octavia Butler and other writers as a kind of wayfinding in this moment.
It's interesting, you know, because I've only just begun to hear this terminology, woo-woo. I didn't know it existed until I wrote this book. Like I finished this book, I should say. I don't think it existed when I started this book, but I only heard it as I was writing the book. And I find that really, really interesting because I'm always saying that, like, with regard to magical realism, what everybody talks about as magical realism is just realism to us. You know what I mean? Like for us, it's just like it's part of our cultural makeup, man. If you're from the Caribbean, if you're from Africa, if you're African American, there's these certain things, there's a certain arena of your life which is just realism, which other people think is just really kind of fantasy and crazy and, you know, just maybe not crazy, you know, but just a bit like it's nothing to do with this tangible world that we exist in, you know. And I've just never believed that. So I think, like, you know, our first stories were speculative. You know, I feel like, you know, the legends and myths that we tell each other are speculative. I mean, I think we've always existed in that realm. And even as a kid growing up, you know, like I feel like I was born into that when it came to like Black culture. Like, you know, everyone's really big on African futurism and Afrofuturism right now, but it was always there. Like, I feel like I was just born into that. And I'd look around and I was like seeing like, you know, Parliament, Funkadelic, Mad Professor, Scientist, if you talk about reggae, you know what I mean? I'd see those album covers and I'd just be like, yeah, that's my vibe, man. You know what I mean? And I was talking to Tobias Buckman, and I was saying, this was way before Lando. This was when I was like a young boy, you know what I mean? I was just steeped in this whole kind of sci-fi attitude to music, visuals, and then later on, I suppose, came literature with Octavia and stuff like that, you know? So for me, it's just part of life. It's as natural as breathing, actually.
You know, if I could jump in and say, like, one of the things that I really enjoyed about the novel, Courttia, was, and like when I was reading it, was I mean, I feel like now, like right now, maybe in some of the popular culture conversations, certainly happening in like US popular culture, I'm thinking about like, there kind of seem to be almost like two ways one imagines, say, the Black fantastic, right? And that the one that is enjoying a little bit of prominence right now to some degree is the Black fantastic that uses the fantastic to talk about the the pain and the torture and the misery of that existence, right? And that there can be value in that for sure and all that. But there's also been, it's been interesting to me to see the pushback against that as well. And the desire saying like, do you need the fantastic to restate what, if you're talking about say like a Black audience, what the Black audience already knows? And so one of the things that I loved about your novel, and then when I think about Octavia Butler, what she always found a way to complicate was it was never just like, this is all bad, and that there was a way that somehow it was reifying the idea that Black history is always a negative history.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I just loved just that one thought experiment that was the beginning of the, that was at the heart of the novel, which was just, let's just say that that big piece of history that everyone is still working through, it just didn't happen. And I remember when I got there, I was like, wait, what? Oh, okay. And I can't tell you how much, like, I was already enjoying the book, but when that was the root of it, and it just said, no, I'm just going to talk to you. Obviously, there's still going to be problems. There's still going to be hardship. There's still going to be, as Naomi was saying, human conflict, right? There's still going to be those issues.
Yeah.
But that big thing, it's gone.
Yeah.
And I just loved that.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. My editor said to me, like, I think when we got to the end, she's like, you realize you just never said? You never said it didn't happen. You just like, and when I explained it, I think we went to a conference or something where we were promoting the book, like a sales conference, and I stated it in that way, it's the way that we're talking about it now.
Yeah.
Everyone was just like, what? Hold on, what? And then, it's there throughout the book, but I didn't want to overstate it. I think one of the things also with Octavia that I really loved is that she didn't feel that she had to counteract this lack of talking about the trauma in that sense with a nobility. With our nobility, you know, she was interested in us as 360-degree human beings, you know, with all warts and all. And I think it stems to this idea of us, you know, whether we're talking about being with self or being with other, you know, and I'm really interested in being with self writing. And that doesn't mean that people shouldn't do being with other, you know, it's just for me, myself as a writer, I think it has a place and we need to talk about that experience, you know. But I think what sometimes comes with that, and maybe I get a bit too deep, I don't know, is that we start to center, the very people that we shouldn't be centering, you know. I'm interested in who we are wholly, basically, you know. So I think we end up centering whiteness.
Yeah, I mean, I think who we are wholly and who we are among each other, right? Because I think, you know, as I was in the process of writing my novel, I was like, oh, no one's going to want to read this because it's really just about Black people talking to each other about their stuff, right? And it's not about slavery and pain. It's actually about the pain that's inflicted by family members on each other as we attempt to be human. And I was like, well, that's gonna be a hard sell. But it wasn't. But I do think it can, I think it's an active process because there's so much conditioning that says, even if you're writing a story about Black folks, you better have a white person in there to make it saleable, interesting, relevant, universal, all those things, which are really code words for anti-Blackness, right?
Definitely. But also, sorry, just for a type of supremacy as well, a supremacist hierarchy, which, you know, there's white people in my book. From day one, you know, there's kids riding their bikes in the start of the book, you know, there's a couple of white kids in there, you know, it's because I'm just erasing that hierarchy. I'm not negating anyone else's existence, you know, and I just don't talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the book is also, as much as it's not concerned with the legacy of slavery and colonialism, it is concerned with the question of why humans need a kind of brutal hierarchy in order to order ourselves. I think the book's asking, is there a world that we can imagine that does not require the intense subjugation of an underclass of people, right? And so as much as it's not about race or class as a proxy for that, it really is actually really a deeply class-oriented book that is thinking about those questions. Okay, this is also my opportunity to say buy Courttia's book. There's links in the Zoom.
Buy
But-
everybody's book, please.
Yeah, buy everybody's book. So I also wanted to talk about writing process, and what does it look like when it's going well, and what do you do when you get stuck?
You wanna jump in?
Oh, I was so for myself, like now, I have the thing that saved me was my wife having kids. And when I say it saved me, it's because it forced me to create routines. And the thing that I was missing before was routines. And I might say like, well, if I, before we had kids, or before we were married, before we were together, I might spend 8 hours. I say like, I'm going to have just like a 8-hour run of inspiration. And this is just, I'm going to sit here and do this thing. But in reality, I might really only be working for about an hour, because I would play some music, I would watch something, I would get up and make a sandwich, I would this, and this, all these things. But then when our first kid came, our older son, the routine, it didn't matter. My wife and I, especially in those early months, we'd made a deal that each of us would get 2 hours out of the house. In my case, at the beginning, it was honestly like, in my case, I could do a little work. In her case, so she could just keep herself sane and just like get some air, But it didn't matter. Like at the end of that 2 hours, if I wasn't home, that kid, he was gonna be just in that apartment alone, or else I don't know what was gonna happen. So we had to stick to these things, and vice versa. And so what it forced me to do is I'm like, now, if it's not the school year when I'm teaching, I've made it now. I write 2 hours a day from 10 to 12, usually, if my life can allow that. And then I don't do anything else. And I've just been more productive than I've ever been by keeping it to that, largely because my brain knows that 2 hours, if I can get it, like during the school year when I'm teaching, I can't get it, but other times I can get it. And if I can get that time, that's where I can pour everything in. And then the rest of the time is remote school with the kids, or it's, running errands, doing laundry, all that other stuff. But as a result, I don't think the whole rest of the day I'm wasting time, I'm losing writing time or anything like that. And so that sense of routine has like saved my life as a writer.
Yeah.
What about you two?
I can relate to everything you just said. I think definitely having kids has really honed my routine. I'm a pretty I try and just write for fun as much as possible, and I try and have fun as much as possible. So mainly, most of the time, I'm just writing for myself. I'm just writing because this is what I like to do, and I like to try out ideas. So generally, that's what I do. I just splurge. Basically, it doesn't matter what I'm writing. It doesn't matter why I'm writing. I've got to write something, and I do whatever I feel like doing. Basically, I don't try and censor myself. I don't try and limit myself. The one time I tried to censor myself writing, it came out very, very badly. And so I think I've tried to learn from that and just be like, okay, just go for it, just to put it all down, And then, some days, it comes out really badly, like there is some, I've got a short story collection coming out, and I had like a list of all these stories that I wanted to try out. And, sometimes I came to the writing of a story and it just didn't work. Fine, next, on to the next story, and then the next one might work, or that one works, but it needs a lot of editing. And I'll be like, I know how to fix that, or I don't know how to fix that. And I'll wait for a little while. I think if I'm blocked in any way, I will just step away from it, and I will just like wait for it to tell me what it needs, I don't always know in the moment. And then just try and revise, or sometimes just leave it alone. What do you do, Naomi?
Well, I'm at the very beginning of this process of being transformed by the act of becoming a parent. So, but I, dressed today in front of you. So that's the success. No, I'm joking. My baby is now, he's 14 months old.
Okay.
And so, we've survived the really hellish first few months, but the pandemic was actually a gift, because I was able to be at home and actually have a more easy routine. I wrote a ton after the baby came,
Nice.
which was
Yeah.
a complete surprise to me. I was
Yeah.
prepared to be a zombie for the first year. And I was surprised to find that nonfiction was really what I wanted to be writing about. So I wrote an essay about my birth experience that came out in Harper's last summer. And I'm working on another follow-up related to that. And so that was completely a surprise to me. And I think what I've learned in the last year or so is that a certain amount of openness to both the content and to the way that stories come is key, right? So I obviously, ideally, it was like 8 to 11 in the morning. Afternoons for naps and reading, like that, like I wanted to live a semi-retired life as a writer. Who doesn't? But now that my life has really been changed, I was like, oh, I get what Toni Morrison was talking about, getting up before the kids are stirring, because those dark hours are the only moment when you really have the amount of quiet and peace for me to be able to dream up new stories, or to work on articles or essays. And so, yeah, I have found myself up at 4:30 in the morning, and like that clutch 45 minutes before this kid sounds like a car alarm when he starts going. So that 45 minutes before the alarm goes off were amazing. And I get more done in those 45 minutes than I ever got done before, when I had hours and hours and hours of time. So I think I relate to this idea that like the constraints have really allowed me to be more productive than I was before, when time felt like it was way more generous than it has been.
So impressed that you have a 14-month-old who sleeps till 5:15.
Oh no, he does it.
Okay.
He does sleep
I
through
was
the night.
sitting there so envious.
No, Victor. Let me clear that up. He goes to sleep at 7 with like many wake-ups between that and 7 a.m.
Of course.
So that's not.
I'm only half kidding, but also slightly jealous.
No, I mean,
Of that period.
no, that's not true. So let me strike that from the record. That's not a thing. Okay, Koye wants to hop in here. As someone who's wrestled with realism and speculative, how would you describe the different experiences you had writing realism versus taking on a speculative project?
Hey, Courttia, how you doing, man? Old friend from the UK.
Yeah, hi, Koye.
I don't, I'm really boring with the answer to this question. I don't know if people really get fed up when they hear me talk about this, but I don't make a distinction. I try not to make a distinction between things. Obviously there's the world building, and there's the kind of fantastical realms that you're dwelling in and stuff like that. But I try and keep it as grounded as possible. I want it to feel like it's real. So I try not to approach it in any different way, apart from, obviously the thought that goes into, okay, so what's this going to look like? Where's this going to be? How am I going to look at the geography? What are the rules of this world? What can Marquis do or not do? But so many things that I write in reality are conjured up from imagination, in a sense. It's very strange. You're kind of like, it's the stealing thing that Victor was talking about. You're constantly stealing stuff and then changing it to suit what you want to do. It's a really great art form for that. You're constantly maybe not building the world, but remaking the world in your own image, in the image that suits you. So if it's I'll take someone's house. I remember one time for the Gospel According to Cain, I was interested in someone's house who lived in Lambert Grove. I was like, well, maybe I might buy that. And then it was just way too expensive for me. I couldn't afford that house. So I was like, but I've got these plans. I've got these floor plans. And so for Beverly's house in the Gospel According to Cain, I took the floor plans and I said, okay, I'm going to use that bit, but then I'm going to move this over here, and I want the bathroom over here, and I'm going to make, it's not going to be that house, and it's not going to be there by the railway bridge. It's going to be on the other side by Goulburn Road, like a couple of blocks away from where it actually is. And and I just reworked it, remixed it, as we do in our culture. And I think yeah, I took the same approach with gospel. You know, I was like, okay, so here's London, and I had a map of the outline of London, the map that's in the book, and I redrew the boroughs. You know, and I said, okay, we're going to call them Fitz and Falano, which was a shout out to Fela Kuti, or a leg band, you know, which is obviously a leg band. And I'm going to just remix it and refit it. So I try and keep my attitude the same, because I feel like it's just like, sorry if it's a long-winded answer, but I feel like it's just like, say, with the character of Beverly in the Gospel According to Cade, if I start thinking to myself, I am writing a woman, I'm going to undermine myself. So if I start thinking I am writing speculative fiction, then I'm going to undermine the constructs, the foundations of what it actually is. Does that make any sense? Like, I don't want to be hyper aware of it, you know. I just want it to come naturally, you know. So I try not to question myself too much.
Yeah. So Courttia, there's another question from you from DJ, which is about basically trying to write not just novels about a certain inner city Black demographic. Funny enough, there's a whole riff about the inner and the outer city in a river called Time that you might be interested in. So yeah, what's your sense of this? Like the inside writing versus the more universal appeal? Is that something you think about?
You mean in terms of writing about, like, questioning whether I should be writing about inner city kids, or
how he says, or they say, I'm not sure, how important was it to write a book that has a sense of your own identities, African descent, male, etc., and experiences not typical, whilst appealing to everyone?
Yeah, I don't know. I just try and write a good story, you know. I mean, that's all I think about, and that's what I mean. I try not to think outside. And actually, when I'm teaching, I'm quite hard on people who I feel like are writing for a perceived audience that's outside them. You know, I really be like, not in the sense that I say, oh, stop doing that, but I try and draw their attention to the fact that, like, who are you explaining that you're making roti for? Like, why are you telling me the recipe for making roti? I say to them, when I see a book that explains how to make a cup of tea or explains how you make fish and chips, then I'll be like, I'm okay with that. But until I see that, I don't see, is it necessary? Who are you talking to? Just have an understanding of who you're talking to.
Yeah. Victor, do you think about audience when you're writing? Is that something?
I do, but you know, something you were saying earlier, I feel like in a way speaks to this. When you were saying about your novel, like nobody's going to want this because this is just about these Black people talking to each other, but even more, this is just a story about family, like how family can do harm to one another, as opposed to these other big historical or political issues, right? One of the things that I'm always hammering to my students is that the more particular, and we all know this one, the more individualized, more particular you make the experience you're giving the reader, the more universal it will become, right? That I believe, like, the path to the universal is through the absolutely individual, right? As long as, I mean, certainly if you're talking about, like, say, a more commercial type of fiction where the main character is at heart just an engine who is moving through a plot, then on some level you do want somebody who does not have an interior life and things like that. But if you're talking about the point is that a reader is supposed to care about this human being, then to my mind, that's when when it has to get so granular and so specific. And it could be naivete on my part, but my feeling is that if you write it that way, then whatever the very specific experience it is, not just of being, say, let's say Black from New York, but being Black from Queens, and being Black from Southeast Queens, and being Black from Southeast Queens on 229th Street, like, that is the experience that I have to discuss. I have to talk about this particular associated foods that was on the corner. I have to talk about this particular, and that everyone who is willing to see themselves in that experience. Because what I'm really talking about is, say, just a kid, let's say it's a growing coming of age story about a kid just getting their first job at the Associated, and how they discover at that Associated supermarket all the inner life of their neighborhood. And they grow up because they realize, like, they thought they were the center of the universe, but they learn about their community through that job, working in the back of the supermarket. Saying it's just some broad, saying it's a Whole Foods in anywhere town does not convince anybody to believe in that story. And so that for me, like when I think about audience, I think more like I went through this in this very particular way. Maybe it will sound familiar to you, even if the people, the person or the place or whatever is not familiar to you.
Yeah.
And so for me, like that's always when I think about like how do you get those things across? It's believing in that. And you know, I would say like depending on the book you pick of mine, I can promise you, the world has shown they will not invest themselves in a book. And then there's another book where they said, oh no, this one I will invest in.
Mhm.
So it's also hit or miss, right? There's no guaranteed
Definitely.
formula.
Definitely.
That's my
Yeah.
thinking usually. Do you think about audience in that way or in any other way?
You know, the few times that I have thought about audience, I find it so constricting, and it always drives me down the road towards censorship. And so I'm always actually like, you know, I ask this to students, like, who do you need to evict from your mental space in order to write the book that you need to write? And that is a question that I'm always asking myself. So I'm always just writing for myself, like Courttia says. Like, I think if I start to think about, even at one point I was like, oh, I'm writing for this like Black girl in Flatbush, and she's like, and I was like, wait, that's just me. Like, let me just stop thinking about this
Throw
so-called
that out.
ideal reader. Like, let's give her a rest and you know, put me back at the center of the book. I mean, the reality is that writing is such a solitary experience, although there's the joy of talking to you guys. That's the sweetness, is the publication that allows us to be in community and lets the work live on in ways that we might not have imagined. But the actual grind of the work is so solitary that let me at least be at the center of that, because who else is there? Like, it's you and the computer for the most part, or your pen and pad. So that makes more sense. Anyway, so I think we have to wrap up. And, you know, so DJ is asking this question about books that have center joy in the Black experience. I was thinking about this question, like, what is the shape of your joy right now? Like, what's the thing that even in the midst of something very difficult, what does joy look like in month 13 of lockdown life?
You know, I'll throw something out there for myself. Like this is not a book, but it was Black Joy specifically yesterday. On Twitter, somebody shared a thread of maybe like 7 or 8 TikTok videos that was just like, here's Black Joy in all its various forms, and it's just literally like one of them is just a young woman, and she says, "What happens to me every time I hear Morris Day and the Time come on?" And then she just like goes like this, and then she's wearing the mustache and the coat, and she just starts dancing, and then just goes on to the next one. And the next one is 2 young dudes, but they're dressed up. They're wearing like wigs or something like that, so that they look like older men, and they just tell terrible dad jokes. And they're just like old Black dads. They're just like, hey, how much did it cost to put a chimney up at someone's place? And said, nothing, it was on the house. And they're terrible jokes, but it's these 2 young Black men, probably 20 years old, dressed up like this, laughing their asses off, making each other laugh. And I know this is not literature, but 8 TikTok videos of just Black folks cracking jokes, acting silly, was so much joy. And it made me, particularly right now, made me so happy online just to see just silliness, Black silliness was a pleasure, you know?
Yeah. That's pretty amazing. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel the arts in general, I find it in, you talk about Morris Day and something like that, you go back to those things. I mean, my wife has just been like playing Prince nonstop. We got a new car today, and she got in the car, she said, I have to anoint this car with Prince.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, so just seeing people doing their things and getting joy out of just doing their things, whether they've passed or they're with us, that really does something for me. And I'm always trying to reconnect with that, just that joy in our excellence, or just the joy in our simplicity as well. Like you're talking about, those videos would have really, you know, lit me up. You know, I'd love to have seen that. Just everything, just people just doing their thing and being themselves and being true to who they are. I think does it for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I want to just say briefly, for me, it's my baby is a very cute baby. Obviously, I'm biased, but his laugh is hilarious.
Yeah.
And he's just the sweetest, and he loves Yemi Alade, so she's always dancing to like West African music videos. So that's like the highlight of joy for me right now. Yeah, that's it. Somebody, so there's always some Caribbean nationalists in the room. Okay.
Well, we have
amazing.
essentially run out of our allotted time, but this has been such a rich discussion and so much fun. And Courttia, congratulations on your new book. We are so happy to be pushing it. And
thank you.
Also, Naomi and Victor, you've been such great interlocutors. And hope to see you all again soon. Be well, be safe. Courttia, any last words?
No, I just want to say thank you to everybody for attending. Thank you to Naomi and Victor for just such a great conversation. Just thank you all, man. It's just been such a lovely evening. Really enjoyed myself.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all very, very much.